was a hit and run by a drunk driver today at Quahog Park. 2 children are missing.
I was just there.
It seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV. Luckily, there's a Family Guy which has all of that and much, much more, with one of the most hilariously wild casts of characters in cartoon history. With more characters, more episodes, and more of those ever-coveted funny moments, today we've got a massive good to evil video that includes every notable character in Quahog.
Hey, sorry, man. Am I late? What'd I miss? Oh, thank God you're here. What do I do?
Tell him to keep playing. He's in too deep.
I'm Keith Finosi with Wicked Binge, and this is Family Guy characters, good to evil.
Well, if you're looking for someone with issues, I think you've found your candidate.
As usual, we'll be starting with the most good character and working our way down to the most evil. These are Quahog's friendliest faces, the good section. Taking the gold medal of good is the most unfortunately named citizen of Quahog. Say hi, Elle Hitler, but actually, maybe you word it differently. Unlike most of Quahog's other citizens, Elle doesn't really seem to have any super bizarre defining character traits. She's a big Garfield fan and has an affinity for puns, but her main characteristic is really just pure positive energy. She tends to make cheesy jokes that often make those around her cringe or chuckle, and either way, it's always followed up by that infectious laugh.
These are gonna go straight to my thighs. Now, if only I could find a man to do the same.
A lot of people might say she's obsessed, but we'd say she's pretty normal. A character with such infectious positivity and really no bad characteristics is worth a lot in such a crazy town.
Well, I'd say this is a perfect way to spend a Friday night.
Taking the silver medal of good is a character who falls into that same category. It's the ever soft-spoken Bruce. One of Family Guy's longest running gag characters, Bruce is a gentle guy who's always there when the citizens of Quahog need a helping hand. The absolute worst anyone could say about Bruce is that he's a little promiscuous.
Straighten itself right out.
Ah, merciful heavens.
But that doesn't really take much away from his standing here, especially since he's such a sweet guy overall.
Yay!
From teaching a CPR course to volunteering at an orphanage to even helping exorcise spirits from the Griffin household.
Hey, let's talk to some spirits.
Bruce is among Family Guy's most consistently nice characters. Like Elle, he's a stand-up guy who always lightens the mood around him, making him one of the most pure-hearted citizens of Quahog. From one gay icon to another, the bronze medal of good goes to the criminally underused Jasper. He's Brian's gay cousin, always there when he needs a place to stay, an ear to listen, a shoulder to cry on. You name it, Jasper's there for it.
You know, there's been a lot of talk lately about homosexuals, but how do you know what to believe?
We can't say quite as much good about him as the characters above him, simply because there's not as much screen time for him as most of our other characters. In fact, Jasper's last significant role was all the way back in season 4, but hopefully he and Brian are still keeping in touch because he's proven to be a friend you can count on. Hey everybody, next up is Bernie the hamster. Would you like to be his friend? We sure would. He seems like a swell guy, even though he has only like 20 seconds of screen time in The Man with Two Brians. Still, aside from breaking into Peter's house, he seems like a great buddy to have. And Fox, if you're watching this, please give us an episode about him already.
Please, sir. I want some more.
Next is war veteran Ida Quagmire, formerly Dan Quagmire. She's Glenn's father. Would that be mother now? Well, in any case, she's pretty great. The two have a very strong relationship. Ida is patient with Glenn and understanding of his struggle to get used to her transition. When Glenn refuses to accept Ida's relationship with Brian, she still chooses him, showing that she places her son above anyone else, as a parent should. Ida's also a strongly outspoken member of the trans community, willing to call out Peter in trans fat for transitioning just to use transgender restrooms. She does this not to talk down on him, but to show him the error of his ways and help him correct them.
Excuse me, ma'am. No porn at the bar.
Oh, it's okay. I'm transgender.
All around, she's a great person and one of Quahog's strongest proponents of justice.
My name is Cleveland Brown, and I am proud to be.
His name is Cleveland Brown, and he is proud to be. Up next. One thing you'll find us Family Guy fans almost universally agreeing on is that Cleveland is by far the best friend you can find on Spooner Street. Acting as the straight man of the series, Cleveland is always there for his friends when they need someone to listen to or support them. He's extremely protective of his family and would do anything for them, and unlike many other characters in the cast, he mostly kept his morals in check over the course of the series.
What the hell? No, 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 no!
What gives Cleveland such a high position on our list is just how darn forgiving he is. There's him forgiving Glenn for sleeping with his wife back in season 4, likely the most memorable example, but even in the season 21 episode Unzipped Code, he sacrifices his own job at the brewery to give Peter a chance at a promotion. Even though Peter spent that whole episode trying to sabotage him out of jealousy, Cleveland's just about the best buddy you could ask for in Quahog, which keeps him in a generous top 5 spot. The only thing keeping him from being placed higher is that his passive people-pleasing tendencies can lead to him going along with Peter's schemes a little little too often. This is how people pleasers die.
Apologize? I cheat on you and you apologize to me?
There was also that one episode where he rubbed his fling with Carolyn in Brian's face after she cheated with him, which was a pretty cruel move by his standards. Should have stopped your taxi for him, Brian. Now we have the one that got away, Brian's ex-girlfriend, Jillian. Have you ever kicked yourself for fumbling your dream girl? Just remember that you didn't screw things up as bad as Brian did with Jillian. She's a girl of very little brain, but thankfully, she more than makes up for that with her big heart.
Oh my god! I've never felt so stupid!
Really? Jillian is friendly with absolutely everyone. Heck, her relationship with Peter is the main thing that got him to push Brian to finally move in with her. She's gotten much less attention in recent years, but we're hoping she finds someone who treats her right. When you hear Mayor of Quahog, you probably think of a certain Batman actor the Noid would do well to avoid, but while he can never be truly replaced, Mayor Wild West isn't a bad substitute, all things considered. Voiced by Sam Elliott, Wild West is as eccentric as you'd expect from the cousin of Quahog's dearly departed mayor. The difference is that Wild West is actually pretty serious about protecting and leading the citizens of Quahog. He saves Elle from a burning library, and that's not to mention him generously forgiving Peter for sabotaging his campaign and starting that fire, gifting him a basket of baby mustaches.
All this and more on West's Wonders.
Why isn't he higher? Well, his running gag of asking people if they've killed a man. It definitely raises a few mustaches, to say the least. If there's any character who deserved more of a chance in this series, it was Vinny. When Brian tragically and temporarily died in the season 12 episode of Life of Brian, Vinny was his replacement, a dog who gives off the vibe of a stereotypical Italian mobster.
Hey, don't get fresh with me, studio.
Despite this, Vinny is a good boy. He shows concern for Stewie's emotional state following Brian's death and even helps him bring Brian back with his time machine. Unfortunately, Vinny got barely any screen time, and he's hardly even been mentioned since Christmas Guy way back in season 12. But from what we saw, he retains his good dog status much better than his counterpart, especially since he was willing to give up his newfound home to reunite Stewie with Brian. Oh, and minus points for his mild racism. But really, no dog can hold a candle to baby's true best friend, Rupert. Everyone had their comfort object as a kid, right? Well, sure, not all of them imagined them as an extremely buff man with a teddy bear's head, but we've all got our ways of life.
I have Stewie on one. He says he's been trying your cell.
Rupert may be inanimate, but he's stuck with Stewie through so much, from countless injuries to wild adventures to a concerning amount of weirdly suggestive scenarios.
I never knew there could be such a thing as a perfect day.
That we couldn't bear the idea of leaving him off our list. Next is a long absent character from earlier seasons, Brian's therapist, Dr. Bruce Kaplan. Therapy is important, even for dogs, and alcoholics, who are also struggling with feelings for their best friend's wife. Look, the point is, Dr. Kaplan has his work cut out for him, and he's more than happy to embrace that duty to the best of his ability, if only Brian hadn't quit on him after season 3. That being said, a reunion between these two would sure be interesting. Take notes, Seth. Hopefully Kaplan has more animal clients lined up, like the Evil Monkey, for instance. Despite his name, Evil Monkey's far from evil. Sure, he lives in the closet of a 13-year-old boy and threateningly points at him on a routine basis, but it turns out that he actually was never trying to scare him.
Chris, I'm sorry if I scared you before, but this is a great chance for us to start over.
The guy just wanted to make conversation, as revealed in the episode Hannah Banana. He even helps Chris and Peter mend their broken relationship, at least temporarily. And hey, if you found your wife and your best friend in bed together, you'd go bananas too, right? Time for another deep-cut early seasons character, Mr. Weed, owner of the Happy-Go-Lucky Toy Factory. The first of surprisingly many deceased characters, Mr. Weed was Peter's boss for the first 2.5 seasons of Family Guy. Unfortunately, he's also by far the best boss he's had over the course of 21 seasons. He does come on a bit strong sometimes, and it's implied that he tends to have a more favorable view of handsome men when it comes to the workplace, but those things aside, he's a generally friendly man who does his best to keep things fair and balanced in the workplace.
I shall call you Eduardo.
It's a shame he had to go out so soon. Out of all the characters who have been killed off in this series, he certainly deserved it the least. Man, the gay reps in this series are really nice people though, huh? And side note, there are a lot of characters on this list. I don't know about you guys, but I could use a music break. Hit it!
It's been a long time, you're just as lovely.
Thanks, Twitty. Now let's roll right on to our next entry. Joe Swanson. This wheelchair-bound policeman is always ready to enforce justice in the city of Quahog. He's got some anger issues, as evidenced by one scene implying that he's beaten his son unconscious at least once.
And then another. And then everything got a little hazy. Kevin went to live with a foster family for a while.
And he can have a dangerous ego. While his self-worth has been greatly challenged in recent seasons, in the episode Believe It or Not, Joe's Walking on Air, we see Joe get a pair of working legs and become an absolute menace, abandoning his friends and becoming a massive jerk all around.
And all we got to remember him by are his old legs.
Joe's a good guy, and he's done a lot to protect Quahog from some shady characters, but he has more than enough sins to make his spot in the good section a pretty low one.
You boys have been very naughty.
He's a far cry from the original black friend of Peter's circle, but Jerome is still a pretty decent guy. He's much less soft-spoken and passive than Cleveland. In fact, he can be pretty vindictive.
What, you dating that guy? It's just a lot to take in.
Oh, yeah? You're telling me?
He refuses to let his daughter Pam see Chris due to him being white at first, and has no issue beating up Peter and company for destroying the bar and his only remaining picture of his mother, though it is kind of hard to blame him there. Still, Jerome has shown a decent amount of patience on other occasions, like forgiving Peter's poor treatment of him in his first major appearance.
We cool, Peter, we cool.
He's also willing to learn and grow as a person, since he does manage to overcome his prejudices against white people, ultimately letting Chris and Pam date if they really want to. This might be an odd choice, but we're placing resident punching/farting bag Meg Griffin next. Now, to start things off, Meg definitely has some issues.
You're such a good listener. You're not like the other boys.
In one episode, her time in prison hardens her into a violent criminal who beats Connie and her friends with an entire bag of soda cans, not to mention the non-consensual tongue kiss. Speaking of which, in the episode Barely Legal, she kidnaps Brian and ties him up, probably planning to do something not even barely legal to him. That said, while Meg has some severe issues, we're giving her an honorary spot in the good territory for one simple reason. The fact that she's a decent person despite her horribly abusive family is nothing short of a miracle.
You don't know anything about me!
Who was that guy?
Meg is a pretty nice person, if a very unstable one, but she's also incredibly forgiving, seeing as how she's stayed loyal to her family and even saved Peter's life from his sister Karen despite the horrible bullying he puts her through. The fact that she has any compassion for this man is frankly incredible, and it's enough to bump her a lot higher than she'd be otherwise. And perhaps against our better judgment, it's only fair that next we rank Chris Griffin. Like Meg, he's got his issues. He can be extremely violent at times, has a concerning pornography addiction, has a pervy streak that would put a shonen comic relief character to shame, and definitely inherited that dumb and increasingly reckless gene from his old man. No. Him and Meg together can be extra trouble. Let's not forget the episode where they covered up Stewie's skull and brain being exposed so they wouldn't get into trouble. That said, along with being abused like Meg, if less so, Chris excels in one particular area: compassion. He isn't perfect, nor anywhere near it, but Chris is a genuinely sweet person whose worst moments usually will just come out of the abuse and manipulation he experiences from others. He's friendly with everyone around him and is willing to give up his own desires for the sake of others' happiness on a regular basis, like cruelly dumping Taylor Swift so she could write a successful breakup song about him, or pretending he didn't have a girlfriend so Peter would feel less bad about being a loser in his younger years.
I guess we're both a couple of fat losers, huh, Dad?
Chris also earns the Darwin Medal for various reasons, my personal favorite being the time he failed to shoot Guten Tag the Nazi because he couldn't tell him apart from Peter.
How do I know which one is the real Dad?
We never switched. Wait, we don't even look the same.
If you plan to go out to sea anytime soon, you'd be wise to consult Seamus, lest you be consumed by Daggermouth. Little is known about the peg-appendaged pirate, and his handicap has even more origin stories than Joe's, who has way more screen time. But one thing's for sure, Seamus is a tough guy who is willing to warn others of any danger he sees in his outings, like telling Peter that no seafarer has ever faced Daggermouth and lived to tell the tale.
No, not you, Seamus.
Ah, poo.
Maybe one day we'll see Seamus in his adventuring days, but for now, X marks the next to last spot in the good tier for this pirate. Closing off this section is the one-time character, Pearl Burton. She appeared in Brian Wallows and Peter's Swallows, one of the most acclaimed and surprisingly heartfelt episodes of the entire series. She initially seems to be an extremely bitter old shut-in hiding from a world that refused to appreciate her passion for singing. She was instead only recognized for the commercial jingles she sang, but Brian shows his appreciation for her natural singing voice and allows her to see the world before she's tragically killed off.
Goodbye, Pearl.
This saved her from living a life that consisted of nothing but bitterness and spite, though there was still a lot of that stuff. Rest easy, Pearl. Here's hoping you're singing in heaven. Don't you worry, though. We've still got a lot to see ourselves. We now venture into the gray area. I say, old chaps, isn't it Buzz Killington around the corner? Stewie's not the only guy who can pull off a British accent.
Yes, I'm aware.
The difference? Well, Buzz Killington, as his name suggests, is that one guy who's way too boring to carry an engaging conversation with.
Evening, everyone. I thought it would be very droll if we all sat down and looked at etchings.
But simultaneously, too nice for you to say anything about it. Not sure what he gets up to outside of cutaway gags, but it's best to just nod along and try to enjoy hearing about the origins of cornmeal. Really though, he hasn't shown up in a while. Hopefully he's doing okay. Somebody over in Great Britain check on him for us, alright? But do not invite him to your party, unless you want it to die right away. You might remember him as Tiger Woods, but up next is Cleveland Brown Jr. In the earlier seasons, Cleveland Jr. was Cleveland's hyperactive son. In the Cleveland show, however, he was given this sort of Diabito-esque redesign, or so you'd think, until it was revealed that he was actually killed by the newer, larger variant of Jr. Apparently, Cleveland somehow didn't question the sudden change because their relationship is pretty healthy. Jr. is a kind-hearted boy who loves his daddy, but he's also pretty unstable.
How you doing? Come on in.
In one episode, after Peter accidentally shoots him in the arm, Junior threatens him with revenge, leaving him to wonder whether or not it was a joke.
Hey, Mr. Griffin, I'm just kidding. Or am I? You're gonna wonder about that, you fat bitch.
Like Chris, he's a nice kid, but his stepbrother Rallo puts it best. Any day he doesn't snap and kill us all is a miracle. Next is manager of the Quahog Mini Mart, Carl. With the voice that anyone who's seen Bob's Burgers will find eerily familiar, Carl is a generally laid-back gas station store clerk. He enjoys discussing films with people and generally seems to be a decent guy, though on one occasion he does fire Meg for the simple fact that she objects to Chris being promoted before her, showing that he can be a little selfish when it comes to placing his own pleasure above doing what's right. Still, he's harmless and generally a nice dude.
I'd like to see that, because I can read it just like everybody else. And the charade continues.
Not much of a force for good nor evil at the end of the day. You're never gonna catch this next entry. Give it up for the greased up naked deaf guy. Little is known about this absolute living legend of Quahog. Why is he covered in grease? What is he running away from? Why is he deaf? Okay, the last one's kind of self-explanatory.
You're never gonna catch me.
But such a mysterious guy was made for the gray area. One thing's for sure though, you're never gonna catch him. Now why don't we drop by the Drunken Clam to visit Horace real quick. He's not the most complex character out there. Sure, he never gets very much focus and was eventually even killed off. That said, he fills that classic role of bartender who tends to his bar, making him a source of comfort for his patrons. He really was just there, but at the same time, he was there. That's gotta count for something. Also, in the honestly just there category is Peter's co-worker at the Pawtucket Brewery, Opie. There's very little to say about this guy, honestly. He only ever appears as a joke character in certain episodes. He seems to be a nice guy and does good work to the point where Angela actually favors him over Peter.
He is your superior.
But due to his, we'll call it limited vocabulary, we hesitate to put him any higher for lack of any real read on his character. Next, let's get our Blackie weather forecast from Ollie Williams. Known for his quick and blunt style of reporting with as few words as possible, Ollie is the weather reporter for Quahog Channel 5 News. Despite his loud voice, he's a pretty chill guy and a family man, though he does lose points for assaulting Peter during his paparazzi arc.
We now go live to Ollie Williams in the Channel 5 traffic copter. What's the scene, Ollie?
Everybody looks like ants!
Probably because you're up so high.
We will say that we don't totally blame him there, though. That said, giving your son coal on Christmas isn't cool. Ollie, you're gonna lose some points for that. Up next is Meg's not-so-secret admirer, Neil Goldman. Neil is one of those somewhat nice but very creepy guys we all either knew in high school or were in high school, to varying degrees. To Neil's credit, he does have some standards. When Peter sells Meg to the Goldmans as a means of paying his debt at their pharmacy, Neil demonstrates some strong loyalty to her, refusing to cheat on her when Lois comes onto him in cosplay and ripping up the contract when he discovers Meg doesn't truly want to be with him.
Oh, don't be afraid of the fire, Meg. I won't let you burn.
Neil isn't a model citizen, though. He's willing to use others' generosity to his advantage, like the time he made merchandise of his and Meg's kiss, but on the whole, he's not a bad guy either. He's got plenty of time to grow past his more creepy tendencies. Time to spread some Christmas frustration, because up next is Santa.
Well, can you be a good boy?
Family Guy's version of Santa is a little different to the usual holly jolly saint American culture is used to. Due to the world's abundant gift expectations, Santa is completely exhausted, leading to him and his elves being extremely overworked. Honestly, despite his low placement here, we don't really have anything bad to say about Santa.
Do it. Please put me out of my misery.
Yeah, he's working himself and his elves to the actual bone, but it's hard to blame him for his frustration given the crap he has to deal with year after year. Hopefully he's on the road to recovery now that Stewie and Brian have convinced the world to limit it to one gift per person. Also, Santa, maybe don't give a baby radioactive chemicals, or a predator a picture of his favorite target. Just a suggestion though. Well, two suggestions, but I think they're both good ones. Next up is Stewie's old acting rival, Olivia. Olivia and Stewie became an absolute hit with their performance of "Thank Goodness I've Got You." Though Olivia is egotistical and rather spiteful, she's also not an outright murderer like Stewie, so that's something. She is willing to sabotage his career though, and always tries to steal the limelight from him whenever possible. In one episode, she even cheated on Stewie out of spite when they got married by official Minister Rupert. Side note, how did she survive having her house burned down? Speaking of toddler rivalries, next is a more recent one, Doug. No, not Chris's talking pimple. Stewie's big wheel sporting rival on Spooner Street. Never seen him? Yeah, most people haven't.
Hey, Stewie. Still sleeping in the slow lane?
While Doug is a jerk who's always trying to show Stewie up, his misdeeds come nowhere near other antagonists of the series, including our favorite maniacal baby himself, so we'll keep him near the middle. Good evening, Quahog. Tom Tucker is up next. The iconic host of Quahog Channel 5 News, Tom Tucker is a wisecracking host with a pretty dry sense of humor. He has a bit of a mean streak, often lacking compassion for the horrific events he reports on, and he has a lot of an ego, even if it's nothing compared to his former co-host, Diane.
I think I'll go get drunk and beat up some midgets. How about you, Diane?
Well, Tom, I just plain don't like black people.
He has his good traits, though. When he briefly dated Peter's mother in one episode, he treated her pretty well and even began to become a sort of father figure to Peter for a time. He also cares for his son Jake and tries to defend him from judgment for his facial disfigurement. Not a great guy, but not an awful one either.
Who's that, baby?
Hello, this is Tom Tucker.
At least he's willing to answer the hard questions in life, like whether or not Nicki Minaj is a bear. I wouldn't have known. Hide your expired coupons, people. Next up is Ernie, the giant chicken. That's right, the giant chicken. The one who gave Peter an expired coupon on that fateful day and since then has been causing property damage all over the place with their on-site death matches.
My God, look at all this devastation. What the hell happened?
To Ernie's credit, he seems a bit more stable of a person than Peter, even attempting to be cordial with him on occasion, but he also cheats on his wife to try and get with Lois. Yeah, maybe he's better than Peter, but as we'll see later, that isn't exactly the most impressive feat on the planet. Fun fact, we're barely even halfway through all the characters we're discussing today, and we've already reached death. The literal Grim Reaper is not even in the bottom half of our list. That's the type of cast we're dealing with. But to his credit, Death's really just doing his job. Yeah, taking souls to the underworld isn't the most pleasant job in the world, but someone has to do it. Plus, Death isn't all bad. He actually helps Peter improve his life on multiple occasions, from saving his marriage with Lois to showing him the dangers of his alcoholic lifestyle. He actually displays some impressive patience with the big guy.
Peter, it's okay. It's just Death.
Oh, thank God.
Though there's also his willingness to kill someone just for being a bad conversationalist.
Check, please.
So the gray area is definitely the proper spot for this guy, yeah. Staying on the topic of death, next up is Vern. Fans of the earlier seasons of the series might remember Vern as the guy who showed up before some commercial breaks to talk really fast about whatever was going on, connecting it to Vaudeville's death and, of course, connecting it to his act as a Tumbler. This is always followed up by him being played off by his buddy Johnny. Why is he in the gray area, though, you ask? Well, aside from him being pretty darn nosy, he was also close friends with Johnny, who he himself asserts is in hell because he likes little boys. He's uncertain whether or not Vern actually knew this before their demise at the hands of Stewie, but it's still worth questioning. There's a bit less room for debate, though, when it comes to Mr. Herbert's dog, Jesse. He's not exactly the most prominent character in the show, but the fact that he's willing to along with Herbert shows that he's got at least some idea of what direction his owner's tastes go in. Still, he seems like a pretty chill dog for the most part, and even helps get Chris and Peter out of the basement when Gutentag traps them there. From Quahog to Stoolbend, then back to Quahog. Next up is Donna Tubbs. Ignoring the absolute character assassination Cleveland experienced in his spin-off, he at least got his own family out of it. Donna is his wife, and the two have a relationship somewhat similar to Peter and Lois's, but, you know, a lot healthier.
Donna, guess what's wearing my watch?
Hope it's waterproof.
At times, they're even seen as the good family in contrast to the Griffins in later seasons. She can be overly controlling, like refusing to let Cleveland and Peter see each other just because she and Lois don't get along. But on the whole, she's a sincerely caring wife and mother who will do anything to protect her family. If nothing else, a step up from Cleveland's last marriage. Standing here with us next is Asian reporter Trixia Takanawa. Trixia is one of those characters who falls into the enough of a jerk to notice, but not enough of one to label as outright bad category.
Sir, how does it feel to have the lake back?
Well, I'll tell you, Tricia, as a local resident, I feel
She gets by far the most focus in the one episode, Tricia and Carter, where she takes advantage of Carter's feelings for her to expose his unethical business practices. While this was ultimately a good thing, and we aren't exactly gonna feel sorry for Carter very easily, it still showed that Tricia is willing to use some underhanded methods to get a good story.
Watch as I have sex with this potentially dangerous man as we take you in depth and undercover.
But we feel sympathetic to her. She does have a hard time desperately wanting her mother's approval, so her mean-spirited tendencies are really all she knows.
Why happy? You know what for Channel 10, just Channel 5, only half as good.
It's not an excuse, per se, but it's enough for us to hold her in decent enough regard. Resident pharmacist / Jewish stereotype, Mort Goldman is up next. In the first couple seasons, Mort was seen solely as an overly polite, albeit socially awkward, Jewish man. He might tow someone's car out of spite or expose their bad, very bad hemorrhoids to a classroom full of middle schoolers, but there's not much malicious about him. His worst trait is definitely how darn greedy he can be. Not only do he and his wife, Muriel, rest in peace, scam their customers on a regular basis, they do it proudly. His bad traits aren't too terrible, but his good ones aren't too good. And that leaves him at a pretty neutral position on our list.
Oh God, an angry mob! I've got to swallow all my valuables and get out of here!
Oh, yeah, and there was also his willingness to accept Peter's proposition of his teenage daughter being an unwilling girlfriend to his son.
What do you think of that, Neil? Daddy bought you a girlfriend.
That's also kind of messed up. Honorable mention to Muriel. She was, they were married.
Oh, yeah!
The Kool-Aid Man is up next. One of Family Guy's oldest running gags, dating all the way back to the pilot.
Oh, yeah!
Kool-Aid Man is a penchant for busting through walls anytime a group of people says, "Oh no!" multiple times. The thing about Kool-Aid Man is that he isn't really malicious per se. If anything, he's an addict suffering from an addiction to mass collateral damage.
Oh, Jeffrey.
Oh, no.
He's also managed to overcome his parents' prejudice and dated a bottle of Yoo-Hoo at one point, showing that he's not a racist, which is always worth some points, or at least not worth taking points off. Grab your lemon pledge, because it's time to clean up Consuela's act next. This Hispanic cleaning lady is one of Family Guy's most memorable gag characters, showing up every so often to clean up wherever Quahog needs her help. That said, she's extremely stubborn, refusing to take no for an answer even when Peter offers her money to get her to leave. She just takes the money and keeps on cleaning anyway.
Can you just give him this flyer?
No, I have no money.
The episode Stewie Goes for a Drive showcases her best and worst traits. She's altruistic enough to take Stewie in when he's lost, but when Brian comes to retrieve him, she refuses, effectively kidnapping a literal infant and losing a lot of morality points. But hey, at least she didn't leave the poor little guy out there by himself. Next up is a character we've decided to show a little more mercy for this time around, Kevin Swanson. Bonnie and Joe's son, Kevin was thought to be deceased in Iraq after a long time absence from the series. That is, until his return in Thanksgiving, where it's revealed that he's actually alive and faked his death in Iraq out of disgust at what his country was doing to the Middle East.
And then we dug the bullets out of that Iraqi family's skulls so they couldn't be traced back to us.
Today I saw a balloon.
This sentiment is totally valid on its own. What isn't valid is abandoning his fellow soldiers completely. It's hard to blame Kevin given the horrors he witnessed and the hopelessness he felt. As for why he's not any lower...
Spend every holiday with your family.
Shut up! I'm a full-size person. I make the decisions.
Well, Kevin isn't malicious. He's actually a generally decent person, despite his misdeeds. He's just become extremely reckless and suicidal. He's not a villain, but a deeply disturbed man who genuinely needs help. Next, let's give it up for the OG mayor of Quahog, Mayor Adam West.
My God, I'm a tomato.
He's the actual, he's the embodiment of pure chaos. When Mayor West is on screen, you know you're not going to be able to predict what's going to happen next. He's killed several people on screen, including Domino's the Noid for attempting to ruin his pizza, and an innocent fisherman to make sure his proposal to Carol would be unforgettable. He also campaigned against gay marriage in one episode and tends to use the town's tax dollars to his own ends.
This press conference is over. I can't see you now. I can't hear you now. You're not here now.
He also dated Meg in one episode, which, ew, not even an ew Meg joke. It's a teenager, sir. He would fall lower, but this man is is legitimately insane, and we don't have the heart to call good old Mayor West a true bad guy. He did, after all, commemorate brave soldiers with a beautiful golden statue of Diggum the Sugar Smacks frog. So surely he can't be all bad. Insane, reckless, and a literal murderer, but anything but malicious. That said, it's Dig Them. Rounding out the gray area, and believe me, he was hard to place, is Stewie Griffin. He's an icon for sure. His flamboyant sense of humor is a great mood lightener, and he's one of the most consistently fun and lovable characters in the show.
Brian, this feels weird.
hit the button.
Further still, Stewie can be genuinely nice sometimes. He cares a lot for his family, particularly Brian and Chris. Stewie has a surprisingly sweet brotherly bond with Chris and often helps him out, like the time he encouraged him to get a date with his Down syndrome girl. Stewie's a good friend to have, too. He's saved Brian from many an existential crisis and has shown willingness to protect his family when need be, even if it's mainly for his own benefit. On one occasion, he's even gone from trying to destroy the world to saving it, like the time he tried to kill Santa but ended up instead encouraging the world to stop being so dang greedy with their Christmas lists so that Santa wouldn't be so overworked. He even cares for his teddy bear Rupert, straight up murdering new Brian for assaulting him. We don't blame you either, Stewie. That said though, Stewie is not innocent.
I used to be innocent like you. I've killed people. Then I lost my virginity at 6.
He's plotted to murder his own mom, killed multiple innocent people, once impregnated himself with Brian's DNA. By the way, no, that episode isn't worth the watch.
How dare you!
He can also be incredibly cruel, like when he brutally beat up Brian for not paying back the money he borrowed right away. All of this is pretty awful, and redeemed only by the fact that Stewie is a baby who seems to be trying to figure out who he wants to be. There are times when he reverts to that infantile state temporarily, and what's more is that in the 2-part special where he meets his future self, he seems like a decent enough guy, so there's hope that Stewie will turn out just fine, regardless of his current homicidal, matricidal tendencies.
Ugh, yuck.
And that's, albeit barely, enough to keep him out of our final tier. This is the bad to evil. First up is classic high school bully Connie Dionisio, a cruel, mean girl stereotype you've seen 1,000 times before, whether you're talking on screen or in school. If you've ever met a mean, popular girl, you've met Connie.
Hey there, sweetie. How old are you?
16.
18. You're first.
There really isn't all that much to say about her. While she's implied to have a rough home life and occasionally shows some redemptive qualities, like when she's open-minded about dating Chris because of how sincere he is, Connie's still a bully at her core. She doesn't have any particularly redeeming character traits, but she doesn't really come across as heinous enough to place any lower either. She's not evil, just really mean. From a bully to a victim of bullying turned into a bully, next is Diane's replacement, Joyce Kinney. Being bullied sucks, but does it really justify you becoming a bully yourself? If you ask Joyce Kinney, yes. Yes, it does.
Tom, I think I speak for all of us here at Channel 5 News when I say it's good to have you back here at half your original salary.
In order to get revenge on Lois for a cruel, humiliating high school prank, Joyce Kinney decides to humiliate her on live television, shaming her to the entirety of town for her racy past as a porn star. Now, we'll say this much. We get it. Being humiliated that cruelly in front of your entire school is deeply traumatizing, but repeating the cycle doesn't make you any better, especially as a full-grown adult. While we feel for her quite sincerely, we can't exactly excuse her cruel revenge scheme, especially since the two sincerely became friends in their adult years. As much as we'd like to place her higher, next up is Loretta Brown. Cleveland's unfaithful ex-wife is one of Family Guy's least beloved characters, and with good reason.
Cleveland!
Aside from generally not being funny, she's also cheated on Cleveland in season 4 with Glenn.
You name the time and the place, little Nick.
Her reasoning was that Cleveland was spineless, which, although valid, it should go without saying that it's no justification for betraying a committed lover.
I need a real man, and Lord knows that ain't you.
That said, she does show some sincere remorse later on. In Love, Black Shuli, she meets up with Cleveland in an effort to win him back, during which Quagmire tempts her into adultery. This time she refuses though, showing that she's actually repented of her actions and wants to get back with Cleveland. While it's not quite convincing enough to rank her any higher, at least she found a little bit of redemption eventually. Next, let's talk about Peter's other deceased boss, Angela. Angela's only good trait might just be the fact that she's voiced by the late Carrie Fisher, but other than that, most of what we have of Angela is her being your typical crotchety boss. There's one episode that cements her placement in the bad section. In Peter-assment, she harasses Peter in the workplace and successfully manipulates Peter into believing she's suicidal, planning to kill herself if he doesn't sleep with her.
Shh, don't talk, just breathe. It turns me on.
We get it. Loneliness can really do stuff to people. I mean, look at me. But that's never a justification for hurting others. Still, she has some level of morals. When Peter accidentally blows up a children's hospital in Tales of a Third Grade Nothing, for instance, Angela makes sure he faces legal action for it. She's more of a broken jerk than an outright supervillain, so she doesn't belong any lower, at least.
That felt so good.
All I want to do is please you, Griffin.
Now let's turn to the Griffin family, but not to the one you're thinking of. We're talking Thelma Griffin. Peter's mother was foreshadowed as not being the greatest parental figure early on. In one iconic cutaway gag from season 1, Peter recalls his mother using whiskey whenever he had a toothache by chucking the entire bottle at him.
I don't see what the problem is.
So we know from just this one small scene that she's both an abusive mother and an alcoholic. There's also the fact that she kept Peter's Mexican birthplace a secret from him for most of his life. Even with all that in mind though, she was still the better half of her former spouse, Francis Griffin. Francis Griffin might just be the simplest character in this whole section. To put it simply, he's just a flat-out jerk. Francis is a religious zealot, but not even the debatably good kind. He's the type who will relentlessly browbeat others with the Bible, refusing to give any leeway to them and enforcing his legalistic ways on everyone around him. While he claims to love Peter, his idea of love is not lining up with ours, nor Jesus's. Next we have someone to care for, maybe even be there for. That's right, we have James Woods.
Well.
Someone to do for, muddle through for. You have James Woods. Okay, right. We have to talk about him. Well, while he might be a good friend in moderation, he also goes full on yandere if he doesn't have your full attention.
Get out of my house right now, son of a... Yeah.
From identity theft to attempted murder, nothing stops James Woods once he's on the path of vengeance. Unless you've got a trail of Reese's Pieces, that is.
Belongs to Peter Griffin, and that's me.
Driver's license, social
Unlike
security.
many villains, James Woods does redeem himself somewhat, inviting everyone he's wronged to his mansion in And Then There Were Fewer, in a sincere effort to reconcile with them due to his newfound faith. If he'd had more time, we'd give him a more flattering spot, but even so, finding some redemption is worth something, at least. Whoa, jackass ahoy! We now approach Brian Griffin. Of the 3 adults of the Griffin family, we'll give Brian this. While he's been no less corrupted by the later seasons, he's easily the most compassionate of the 3.
How do you do it? What's your process?
Oh, God, Allison, how do I even answer that?
Brian was once the voice of reason for the Griffins, acting as Peter's conscience and slowly growing into his own character. Unfortunately, as time went on, he slowly devolved from an aspiring writer trying to find himself into a pretentious douchebag who mistreats his partners, will do absolutely anything to get laid, no matter how morally depraved.
Oh, you know cancer?
Oh my God, I thought I smelled cancer.
Still want to go back to my place?
Sounds great.
And will also give a baby herpes for the sole reason that he doesn't want to admit that he has herpes. Yeah, really. Actually, can we talk about that last one? There's a whole episode of this show where the plot is literally Brian gives a baby herpes. Just let that sink in. Tack on his various charges of grooming and not the usual dog kind, assault, and general douchebaggery, and his kinder earlier season's variant can't save him from a low spot. Shame, honestly, he really used to be a good boy. Oh yeah, and he's also a racist, apparently.
I should really pick up that milk now before I forget.
Cleveland really put it best. Now we're getting into the real bad guys of Quahog, starting with Babs Pewterschmidt. While she is far less evil than her spouse, don't go thinking that makes Babs innocent. Babs is willing to leave Carter the moment he's down on his luck. When he loses his fortune, she leaves him immediately for another man, only to come crawling back once he gets his fortune back.
Honey, we're rich again. I divorced Ted Turner and took half his money.
She also had an affair during their marriage, traumatizing their son Patrick to the point where she and Carter place him into an institution and forget about him. Heck, Lois didn't even know he existed until adulthood. The one thing saving Babs from a lower spot is the fact that she's clearly very mistreated by Carter.
Well, it's not real fur. It's actually made from bald eagle.
Which has likely affected her mental health on many levels. It's not enough to redeem her, but enough to make us sympathize with her a little bit. Oh, also, in the season 21 episode, Adoptation, Carter reveals that Babs once tried to put Lois in the oven as a baby. Yeah, that was when we knew to put her down here. The doctor is in. Up next is Dr. Hartman.
I think I can hear the ocean. Smell it, too.
Quahog's aggressively careless doctor. He's the last one you'd want anywhere near you or your loved ones when you need some health care. While it could be said that Hartman means well, to an extent, the amount of harm and even death he's caused to his patients is too much to ignore, especially since he treats it as little more than a slight inconvenience.
My goodness, you'll be dead within a month.
What?
Oh, Hagar the
He does have some moments of kindness, though, like his willingness to donate his kidney to Peter, even if that was mainly because he couldn't afford to lose him as a patient. At least he's not particularly malicious, though, which keeps him from falling any lower. Now then, play us off, Johnny. To reiterate from earlier, he liked little boys. I feel like that sums it up pretty nicely. He does play a nice piano riff though, but now whatever. Now it's time to finally talk about Peter's barely better half, Lois Griffin.
Let me finish the story, fellas. You don't want to be up all night. Or do you?
Like much of the series' ensemble cast, Lois fell off in terms of morals, and she fell off hard. For one thing, her marriage with Peter is in absolute shambles. While you might default to blaming Peter himself for this, which is far from unreasonable, would you believe us if we said that Lois cheated on Peter before there was any unfaithfulness on his end? With Bill Clinton, of all people, slowly but surely their marriage deteriorated to the point where they hardly even love each other. In Turban Cowboy, Lois says that if Peter cried while being held hostage by terrorists, she'd dump him. That's not even mentioning how she treats her children, showing minimal concern for them and treating every aspect of parenting as nothing more than a burden.
Mom, I forgot my keys. Do you know where...
Lois is also extremely petty and will go to absolutely any length to get back at anyone who does her wrong, or even just opposes her when she's wrong. Lois may be the glue that holds her family together, and at the end of the day, she does seem to love them to some degree, but she's still fallen pretty far in terms of morality. Next is Lois's long-lost brother, Fratric Pewterschmidt. Trauma really does stuff to your head, and boy does Fratric know this all too well.
Beat it, kid. Your mother's busy.
Due to witnessing his mother's affair, Fratric went on a killing spree of every fat person he saw, hence being dubbed the Fat Guy Strangler. He gladly uses Lois to get himself broken out of jail to continue his killing spree, and while he gets a few points for helping track down the killer of Chris's fat camp bunkmates later on, he immediately loses said points when he runs off to presumably continue his favorite hobby of you know what. He's only saved from a lower spot by his insanity plea.
Great. Bye, honey.
Now for the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time to finally talk about the Family Guy himself, Peter Griffin. In the first few seasons, Peter was an endearingly ignorant dad who sincerely meant well despite the trouble he caused. From his lovable anti-pollution mascot, Gary the no-trash cougar, to his spree of bullying Lois for the sake of bonding with baby Stewie, there's little room for denying that early seasons Peter is one of the most endearing cartoon characters of all time.
And I don't think you're an addict. I think you're an idiot.
Well, I don't pay you to think, Hot Lip.
Unfortunately, that changed a lot. What was once a well-intentioned dummy with a heart of gold has devolved into a completely depraved psychopath with no regard for the well-being of others.
Jerky boys. Oh, that was awesome. Hey, who else has a dead wife?
Though, admittedly, he's still pretty funny. We've done a whole video covering the worst things Peter's done, but just to give you an idea, he's killed at least 39 people by his own admission to Mayor Wild West, has cheated on Lois multiple times, bullies his own children regularly, often injures and even shoots others for the sheer fun of it. Basically, Peter slowly devolved from a chaotic good character to pure chaotic evil. But under the surface, he's actually worse than most people realize. In the episode He's Black from season 12, it's revealed that Peter has a giant collection of child porn. When Cleveland discovers this in one of their schemes to get Lois and Donna to reapprove their friendship,
Peter, these are hundreds of naked babies in suggestive situations.
I need help.
In season 21, we find out that Lois is only staying with Peter because he threatens to kill himself if she leaves him. Peter is an absolute menace to society with very few redeeming qualities. The only thing that keeps him from falling even lower is that he does still display some hints of goodwill here and there. He's a lot nicer to Meg lately than he has been in years, and it still seems like at the very end of the day, he's a loyal family guy. But all of that does very little to heighten our ranking for him. One thing's for sure though, we sure miss your Lando Griffin days. But if we're being honest, Peter's descent into moral depravity is nothing compared to that of Bonnie Swanson. Joe's wife, Bonnie was originally one of the most kind and gentle souls in Quahog. She stuck by Joe through thick and thin, supporting him through his paralysis and being a good friend to her Quahog neighbors. Later on, she slowly began to tire of her now loveless marriage, no longer feeling any true passion for her husband.
Would you like to sample a warm French baguette?
Oh my.
She's had multiple affairs, including with other wheelchair-bound men, and it's gotten so bad to the point that Joe doesn't even care anymore. He just kind of accepts it.
No, it's okay. I promise you it's okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's okay, Peter.
All of this wouldn't be enough to put Bonnie quite this low if it weren't for the fact that she's been shown planning to kill Joe on multiple occasions. Not to mention the fact that she'll turn on Lois, supposedly her close friend, if it's the popular thing to do at the moment.
Ha! Slut!
Among other things, it's incredibly cruel for Bonnie to not just divorce Joe at this point. The love is clearly gone. Adam West High School's Principal Shepard is up next. Shepard might not have as long a list of crimes as the Fat Man, but they do have similar interests in one very nasty area. That's right, whereas Peter at least acknowledged he needed help with his EDP-esque urges, Principal Shepard is revealed to have nude pictures of his students saved on his phone. His underage students.
Oh my god, Principal Shepard's making porn at school!
He's willing to use these pictures to straight up bribe people and sees absolutely no issue with that.
First of all, I don't care what the courts say. Let's thank the Christian God together.
Add on to that his willingness to bribe, drink, and drive, and no particularly redeeming qualities to speak of, and you've got a total scumbag who's earned a low spot on our list.
And again, we cannot show you the nude photos the Spanish teacher sent to that kid.
Next up, who else could it be but Glenn Quagmire? While many find him hilarious at times, us included, the guy whose whole shtick is, being a predator, has to rank in this category. From kidnapping to murder to multiple counts of groping, assault, grooming, and even necrophilia, Glenn Quagmire is one major scumbag.
Dear Diary, jackpot.
That said, he does have one attribute we can't attribute to almost anyone else. He's actually mellowed out in later seasons. Yeah, he's still a sex-crazed maniac, but he's a sex-crazed maniac who seems to have a bit of a moral compass.
This is gonna be a great weekend.
Or at least to do something in the world that isn't just related to sex. Quagmire's just some guy now. While that's nowhere near enough to make up for years of his past sins, trying to clean up his act, even just a little bit, is enough to keep him from falling any lower. Former co-host of Quahog's Channel 5 News, we now have Diane Simmons. One of many recurring characters to be killed off in And Then There Were Fewer, Diane was the mastermind behind the murders at James Woods' mansion. She kills several innocent people in her quest to simultaneously get back at James Woods and become the only news anchor on Channel 5, framing Tom Tucker for the killings. She ultimately gets caught thanks to Lois's observation, but is taken out by Stewie. Still, the fact that Diane did this with absolutely zero remorse shows that she was way more dangerous than she let on. It's also worth noting that she was kind of a jerk in general, not to mention openly racist.
Well, Tom, I just plain don't like black people.
Next, we have a spot reserved for Stewie's friendly rival turned menace, Bertram. Despite only appearing in 3 episodes, Bertram made quite an impact. Initially, he was Stewie's greatest rival yet, a would-be baby he had to take out so his status as the family baby wouldn't be usurped. Eventually, Bertram was born and respected the pact that he and Stewie made to be sibling rivals. Nah, I'm just kidding. He's just kind of a jerk. What cements his position near the evil end of our list is his third and final episode, The Big Bang Theory, in which he travels back in time to kill Leonardo da Vinci, who happens to be Stewie's ancestor. He does this to keep Stewie from being born, obviously, but when he finds out that doing this would also result in the universe never being created, he just doesn't care? This baby man was so spiteful that he was willing to kill Stewie even if it meant destroying the entire universe.
Worth it!
Can you even simply call it spite at that point? He doesn't have a reason for it. He just really hates Stewie, and that only makes us regard him as even more of an agent of evil, as well as a pretty clear-cut choice for the Wrath Center medal. Just outside of our top 3 baddies is the arguable main villain of the whole series, Carter Pewterschmidt. We've already mentioned in past entries that Carter is a serial cheater and an extremely abusive, greedy man. He's the type of guy who will trick an orphan into thinking he's being adopted just to speed away at the last second.
Okay, I guess you don't want a new family, toys, and a puppy.
Oh, yeah, and there's also the tiny detail of him hiding the literal cure to cancer just to keep more money rolling into his already fattened pockets, which, by the way, gives him a very easy greed center medal.
Oh, fantastic. What the hell was that for?
Now we have the pot and the money.
There's his immense hatred for Peter, his lack of concern for Babs being institutionalized multiple times over different affairs, etc., etc. Carter is a monster, and considering he's more mentally stable than our bottom 3 by far, we really wish we could honestly give him the top spot, but in season 21, he actually showed some genuine remorse in the episode Adoptation, where he adopts a little girl in an effort to at least somewhat make up for his failure at being a good dad to Lois. He shows sincere regret for not being able to go back and make it up to her. It doesn't take away from the atrocities he's committed over the years, but having some desire to better himself even a little bit puts him above the remaining few. Not quite somewhere that's green, but somewhere that's bronze. Herbert the Pervert is the first entry on our podium of evil.
Holy moly, it must be my birthday.
He's one of the most hilarious gag characters in the show, but his position here shouldn't need any explanation. Herbert's character analysis is that he's a child predator. He's constantly scheming to kidnap preteen boys, from trying to lure them to his basement, to stalking them, to repeatedly breaking into Chris's room.
Hello there, Kyle. You look nice today. I see you wearing your big shorts.
The man is an absolutely vile predator, and he's smart too. That's the scary part. In one episode, he finds a mattress with malfunctioning child-shaped robots on it, only to immediately deduce that it must be a trap. He's able to use reverse psychology to get orphans to find the extra money strapped to his thigh.
I hope you don't find the money strapped to my thigh.
Showing that he's deceptive as well as calculating. Oh, and that's not even mentioning his shocking hidden strength. He once effortlessly rescued Chris from a house fire without his walker and defended him from a giant haunted tree that was about to kill him. That there's his man. Actually, not at all. But there is a very strong case for him taking the top spot. In fact, we did put him there in our first Family Guy Good to Evil video. Herbert doesn't really have any wholly redeeming qualities either, while he does show some compassion here and there.
Don't let me catch you, because I'll just wrap you up and eat you later.
Like rescuing Chris and Peter in German Guy and helping set his niece Sandy up with Chris on Valentine's Day. Even these moments are underlaid though by his desire to get with little boys, especially Chris. Sorry, Quagmire, but we're gonna give Herbert the Lust Sinner medal. At least Glenn's tastes don't run in that direction. He's a vile predator and way more of a threat than he lets on, though we'll admit he at least has a concerningly good singing voice.
YMCA.
The Silver Medal of Evil goes to Penelope. Stewie was a pretty maniacal dude in his early years, but it was always balanced out with either flamboyance or an ultimate goal of world domination. Penelope is basically all of Stewie's evil, brilliant early seasons traits without any of the good ones he'd developed later on. She and Stewie take to causing nuclear wars and killing people on a regular basis just for fun. Stewie, having at least some semblance of a soul, gets bored of it, which leads to the reason we give Penelope a much lower spot. She not only knows exactly what she's doing, and in contrast to Stewie, she doesn't have any baby-esque characteristics, but on top of all this, her motivation isn't world domination. It's, as Brian puts it, chaos for the sake of chaos.
Maybe we don't have to kill someone every day. There are other things to do.
Like what?
Penelope sees absolutely no reason to do anything that doesn't cause wars, death, destruction, or just some type of pain to others. She may not be as flashy as Herbert nor Carter, but Penelope lacks any redeeming characteristics, and one can only wonder what she's up to now. Bertram was a bad kid, but even he's an absolute saint next to Penelope. Surely nobody could be even worse than her, right? Surely at least not another toddler, right? Right? Think again. We're giving the Gold Medal of Evil to the only character it really could go to, Evil Stewie. No, not seasons 1 to 3-ish Evil Stewie. In the season 9 episode, The Hand That Rocks the Wheelchair, Stewie makes a clone of himself to fight back against the going soft allegations. This clone is a manifestation of all of Stewie's evil ambitions without any of his good traits. Except we said that about Penelope too, right? Well, okay, yeah, Penelope didn't really have any redeeming qualities, but she still somehow seems kinda saintly in comparison. Evil Stewie literally insists on killing people in the most brutal, painful ways possible. He tries to strangle Brian, choke him with his own tail that he just cut off, tries to kill Stewie himself, dismembers and bleeds out the Kool-Aid man, rips an innocent woman in half, and in a deleted scene, noogies a playground bully to death off screen. I don't think we need to go into detail of why that's incredibly sadistic. As for why he's higher than Penelope, well, while Penelope was irredeemably evil, she at least seemed to be doing it for fun. Evil Stewie just soullessly enjoys causing as much pain and suffering as possible to everyone around him, seeing nobody as a friend or an enemy, just voodoo dolls to destroy in the most gruesome ways he can. It really makes you appreciate the real Stewie a lot more, huh? This guy wouldn't be caught dead having a sexy party. I don't even want to know what he'd do to those poor girls.